friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's My Snowman. So I've stamped out the images I'll be using on some Nina Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn jet black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with her skin, and for that I'm using E000, E00, and E11. I had the wrong marker out there for a second, but I quickly realized that and switched them out. So I used the E11 to lay in some shadows under her hairline and next to her earmuff and on the bridge of her nose, and then blended out with the E00 and then the E000 and added in a rosy cheek with YRO2. I blended out the edge of that with the E000, and now moving on to her hair. For that I'm going to use E50, E53, E43, and E57. So I'm trying a new combo today. For hair, I like to color lightest to darkest, so I'm starting with my E50 and kind of mapping out where I eventually want my shadows to go. Especially with an image like this where she's got the earmuffs on, those would also cast a shadow, so I definitely want to have that map for myself so that I know where I want to put those darker colors, and then I will build up to them. So now I'm taking that E53 and I'm bringing that up. I'm almost covering up all of that E50 because now I know where I want that to go. But as I get to the darker colors, I'm going to use a little bit less and less of them because I still want to keep the majority of her hair, to have a lot of highlight in it. So I don't want to get too heavy-handed with those darker colors. I'm adding in that E43 now, and that's going to dull things down just a little bit, so she'll have some highlights and some lowlights. As it was leaning, it was going a little bit more towards a golden blonde or even a strawberry blonde. I think that E50 and E53 are a great base for many different hair colors, and then you can change it up from where you want to go from there. So now I'm going with that E57, and that's going to be my darkest. I'm going to really darken things up now, and keeping those darker places, where the hair is kind of gathered together in her ponytail holder, as it gets narrower down at her curl, right where the earmuffs would be like compressing her hair a little bit, that band, and then also where her bangs are kind of parted from the rest of her hair. So those are the places that I'm going to keep dark, and then all the areas that are kind of bumped out, I want those to be my highlighted areas. So now that I've got that E57 laid in, I'm going back with that E43, working my way back down, and then adding in that E53, which adds that nice golden brightness to it, and just continuing to work my way all the way back down to that E50. So you can leave some white areas. Some people do that. It makes the hair look extra shiny. I don't like too much white in there. I prefer to use my highlight shade for that lightest tone there, but it's really personal preference. It's totally up to the look that you are going for. So I'm filling in the rest with the E50, but I'm not quite done there. As you can see, there's still some areas that don't look completely natural or blended. So I'm coming in now and adding a few little dark strands over the highlighted area with that E57. And I'm going to do that with the E53 as well, just using the very, very tip of my marker and a very light touch to add just really thin little strokes, and that's going to make it look much more lifelike. So over the course of the next few weeks, you may see me trying out different hair and skin combinations, and that is because I'm going to be working on my hair and skin video for my Copic Favorites series, and I want to bring that to you guys in the new year. So I have to test out different combos and just kind of see what works so that I can share those findings with you all. So stay tuned for that. I went a little outside of the lines there, so I just cleaned that up with my colorless blender, and now moving on to her jacket. I wanted to make it a navy blue pea coat. or at least something similar to that, a navy blue coat anyway, like a wool coat. So I'm using B93, B95, B97, and B99 for that. I'm starting with that B99 and laying in my shadow on the underside of the sleeves and up underneath that scarf where that would be casting a shadow, also down the sides of her coat just to make it look more rounded in appearance because it's got that nice bell shape to it. And then I also want to create some separation between the two front areas and also the pocket. So once I have that all laid in with the B99, I'm going to start to blend that out with the B97. So I'm going right over the very edge of that B99 and pulling that darkest color into this next shade so that I can create a smooth transition. I'm basing my color palette today off of the pattern paper that I'm going to be using later on. So I always keep that just to the left of me off screen. Sometimes I will even like tuck it under the coloring sheet. So if you're interested in me doing that, let me know in the comments. I'm just never sure if it's distracting to have that paper there or not. So you guys can let me know what you think about that. So I'm going on to the B95 now and blending out the B97, just saving a few little areas for the highlights. So I'll fill those white spaces in with that B93. And originally I went around the little cuffs and the little band on the top of the pocket as I wasn't sure what color I wanted them to be, but I ended up deciding to just make them darker. I'm just using the B99. I thought having that darker contrast would add something, a little bit of detail without it being too much. So I just filled that in with one layer of the B99. And then I thought I would give her some jeans. So I took away the darkest two shades, the B97 and the B99, and added in the B91. And I'll just use those to color in her pants, and then also the Snowman's mittens. I just thought that it would be nice to carry that color across to the other side of the card. So I did his mittens and also one of the little stripes on his scarf. So I used the B95 as the darkest, added a little bit of shadow under that thumb, and then blended it out with the B93, and then I'll fill in with the B91. And I just put my light source on the right hand side, so it's a central light source on today's card. So her shading is on the left of her, on her back, and his shading is on the right on his back. I'm moving on to her scarf, and I'm using YR00, YR01, and YR02, which is the same shade that I used for her blush because I wanted everything to be consistent. So I went with that kind of peachy tone instead of the usual pink. And I'm going to give her gloves to match as well. So I laid in my shadow with the YR02. And then I'm blending toward the center of each of those sections with the YR01, and then I'll fill in with the YR00 as my highlight. I didn't even use that shade on her gloves because they were so small. I grabbed the wrong marker there, so I had to switch that and fill everything in. And I am going to add some details to this scarf in a little bit, but you need the first layer of Copics to dry, otherwise it won't be as pronounced. It'll kind of melt into the previous coloring. So I'm going to let that dry, and in the meantime I'm going to color the Snowman's hat band and a few of his other accessories as well. I'm going to do another one of the stripes on his scarf and his little carrot nose. So just doing a quick layer on those. Like I said, I will be adding some details. I'm playing with some different patterns. That's another thing I've really been enjoying doing lately with my Copics. I added in the YR04 for his nose just to make that a little bit more prominent. But I've been playing with different patterns and things on clothing. So now I'm going to go ahead and do that with her scarf. So I want to create a plaid pattern, and the way I'm doing that is I'm going to do one diagonal stripe and then a double diagonal stripe. And then I'll go one direction and then I'll switch to the other direction and do the same thing. One stripe and then two stripes. And I'll add more detail later on with a white gel pen as well when I'm all done with the coloring. And I apologize for that paper being pulled down a little bit, but at least you can see all the things I'm coloring. So I use the lightest three shades to color in the little bird's breasts, and then I'm going to use the YR04 to color in their beaks, just like I did with the carrot nose. I'm moving on to her earmuffs, and for those I'm using G40, G43, and G46. So I'm adding a little shadow down at the bottom, closest to that poofy part, and then a tiny little bit at the top just to create that round look. And then on the poofy part, I'm going to add it towards the bottom left area and blend toward the top right with that G43 and then the G40 as my lightest. And again, I am going to come back in and add some detail, but I need that to dry first. So I'm going to go ahead and color in the snowman's scarf with these shades while I'm waiting. So adding that darkest G46 on both sides, and then also on the bottom part that's kind of tucked underneath. So then I'm going to blend out with the G43. And there is quite a bit of difference between the G46 and the G43. So again, I'm just making sure to really work over the edge of that G46 and pull that color down, creating that nice smooth transition. And then I'm going to blend out with the G40, and same thing, it just needs a little bit of working for these colors to kind of meld together, but they look really good together once you do. And then I'm going to add the little cuffs on his mittens to match. So just blending the same way with the darkest on the outside edges, a little bit more on the right than the left, and keeping that highlight in the center. So now the earmuffs have dried enough to go in and add my little details. So I'm taking that G43 and doing some quick little flick marks to make it look like it's made of like faux fur. And then also adding some in with the G46. Just a few little here and there, and that just makes it look kind of puffy. And later on I will also go back and color her socks green. So I wanted to pull in a different blue combo, so I used B41 and B45. It ended up being pretty similar to the B90s that I had already used. So anyway, I colored in her little ponytail holder and the dog's collar with those two shades. And then I'm going to use the BG10 to add some shading to the snowman on the right side of his body, up under his hat. And then also on his little arms, and where his arm is casting a shadow against his body, and then bringing that around on the bottom. And I also put in a little shading underneath each of the little lumps of coal. And then I'm moving on to his hat, and for that I'm going to use W1, W3, and W5. I thought it would be fun and different to do a gray top hat instead of the traditional black. Also, this is going to match the pattern paper a lot better than if I used a black one, but I just thought it was something a little bit different and interesting. So I used the W5 for the darkest, and then blended toward the center with the W3, and then filled in with the W1. And then I also am going to color in the little birds with these shades. I wanted to make them doves, because they already had a lot of blue going on, so otherwise I could have made them bluebirds, but doves are the symbol of peace, and I have a lot of doves that roost around my house, so I love them anyway. So I thought it would be fun to do something a little bit more neutral toned and winter-esque. So I'm blending right over the edge of those peach colors just to kind of integrate that a little bit more and make it a little more seamless. And then I used W00 and W1 to color in her boots, make those look white. And then I used W5 to color in her buttons. and I'm going to bring in W7 to do his coal. So I'll use W7 and then blend that out a little bit with the W5, and then I'll use the W3 for a little bit of a highlight. Alright, so I wanted to color the dog to look like my dog, Gemma, and there she is. She is an Australian Shepherd. So I knew this part was going to be the most challenging, so I saved it for last. So I'm going to start by just doing a quick layer of shading with the W1 and blending that out with the W00, just so I have kind of a base color down there. I'm not going to color her in completely. I'll leave a few little white areas. But it just gives me it's like a canvas, you know. Once you have a little bit of color on there, it's just easier to keep going. It's not nearly as intimidating. So now I'm coming in with that W3, and I'm going to start to add some of Gemma's gray areas. And just like with the hair for the girl, I'm working my way up to those darkest colors. So now I'm laying in some W5. I'm going to save the W7 for the areas of her that are black. She has white, gray, black, and like a copper tan color on her. So just kind of filling in the different areas of her body. And yeah. Her little tail right now is super fluffy, but when she was a puppy, it was skinny like this. So I'm kind of coloring it like she was as a puppy, but it has a white tip, so I'm going to leave that area white. And once I'm happy with the gray areas, I'm going to start and do her black markings. Some of them are in kind of like a triangular shape, and then others are just little spots and lines. So I'm just kind of like bouncing my marker tip and making it skip across the paper to just add those little spots. She also has a lot of spots on her ears, so I went and laid those in, and a few on the back of her head as well. So the copper parts of her body you can mostly see from the front, except for the ones on her face. So I'm using E31 and E33 for those, and she's got like a little area encircled around her eyes and then white muzzle. So I'm going to lay that in with the E31. She's also got copper on her shoulders, so I added that, and a little bit on the inside of her ears. So once I have those laid in, I'll use the E33 to darken them up and then start to soften them back down with the E31 again. Also, the backs of her feet and legs are copper, so I added a tiny little touch down at her foot as well. And now I'm going to add some black details over the eyes to make them look bright and shiny. This glaze pen, it has like a little bit of a raised surface, so it just makes everything come back to life. And then I'm going to bring in my white gel pen to do my extra details. So I'm going to take that pen and add some more little flicks to the fluffy part of the ear muff, and I think that just made it look really extra fluffy. And I'm also going to add some white markings in on Gemma's back. So I'm just doing little scribble marks and then kind of pressing my finger over top of them while they're still wet to make them just a little bit softer and get them to kind of fade into the rest of the coloring. And then for the girl's scarf, I'm doing the same stripy pattern that I did with the darker marker. Just one stripe, then two stripes, one stripe, two stripes, and then switch to the other direction and repeat the process. I was so nervous about trying this, but I ended up loving how it turned out. And I did the snowman's hat band and the orange stripe on his scarf as well, but the video is getting pretty long, so I'll do those off screen. The pattern papers I'm using today are from the Winter Market collection from Cartabella, and this first print here was what inspired the color palette for today's coloring. I loved those pine boughs. I thought they went so well with this scene with the little snowman, and the little outdoor scene that it's going to become. So I'm flipping through and choosing some different prints here, and I'm going to end up swapping some of these out because that navy blue on the far right, that ended up being too dark. It was just didn't add any lightness to the scene, and I already had the dark with the pine boughs, so I'm going to swap that out. I also am going to swap out the snowflake print for this one that is a little more tone on tone. I thought that would help highlight the images a little bit better than the other one. I felt the other one was a little too distracting. So I'm going to trim these down with some dies. I'm using the stitch scallop rectangle frames to cut the focal panel. I also use one of the stitched hillside borders, all of those from Lawn Fawn, to create a snowdrift. And then for my background pattern paper, I used the large stitch rectangle stackables. So I'm going to work on the focal panel first. I'm going to fit those two pieces together from the back and tape them together with a little bit of Scotch tape. This way I can adhere it as one unit to the card and also pop it up with some foam tape. Then I'll take the little snowbank and I'm going to adhere that down at the bottom of the frame, just fitting it inside and then gluing it into place. I'm going to pop that into my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment, and I'm using Lawn Fawn Deep Sea ink for that. And I'm stamping the sentiment that says Winter Wishes. Just put that in the top left corner, and I stamped that down a couple times to make sure I had a good impression. And then I will pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using a piece of Lawn Fawn apricot cardstock that I scored and folded to a standard size card and stamping in Peachy Keen ink. And this time I'm using the little cat image and some stars and snowflakes and the sentiment that says Cold Hands, Warm Hearts. So now I'm ready to assemble my card. I'm going to take my base print and adhere that to cover the entire front of the card. Just making sure that's lined up nice and straight. And then I'll take that kind of soft pale green print. I'm going to add that across the center. And I also ran that through with the large stitch rectangle stackables so it has the same stitching detail as the back panel. I added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, so I'll peel off those release papers and I'm going to line that up in the center of my card. And once I have it right where I want it, I will press that down into place. And now I can adhere my images. So I'm going to start with that snowman since he's the largest, and I'm going to add him over on the right hand side. And there you can see the little extra detail that I added to his hat band and to the orange stripe on his scarf so that it matches the little girls. So I'll put her on the left, and I want them to look like they're holding hands. So I'm just making sure that they're aligned correctly while that liquid glue is still wet. And then I'm going to take the little dog that looks like Gemma, and I'm going to add that down in the center between them, kind of looking up at the snowman. So cute. And then I've got my two little birds. I'm going to put one over on the left-hand side, and then I'll put the other little guy on the left to complete the scene. And then as a final touch, I'm going to add some Stardust Stickles. You have to be careful with this stuff though, because it is a liquid. It will make your white gel pen dissolve. So I can't put it anywhere that I have any of that gel pen detail. So I added it to her little ponytail holder and the dog's collar and her gloves and boots, and also this snowman's gloves. And then I also put it on her buttons and his little coal. And I also decided to just dot it here and there into the background, and I just placed it randomly, just wherever I thought it would look pretty. And I thought that would just be really nice because it catches the light and looks so sparkly when you tip it. There you can see that. and an up close look at all of that detail. And then there's another peek at the inside. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had so much fun coloring this little scene and creating Gemma on a card, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. It really helps my channel. If you're interested in any of the products that I used today, you'll find those listed and linked below the video in the description bar. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.